Welcome to 9-Hole Reviews. The Korean Peninsula is currently still one of the most volatile locations in the world, and if war were to break out in this area, you would likely see a lot of K2s. The Korean K2 Black Panther main battle tank, and the Daewoo Precision K2 assault rifle. The Koreans arguably made one of the best pre-Global War on Terror rifles that hardly anyone knows about. The K2 is an M16 and an AK blended together with some characteristics of an FN, FAL, FNC, and proprietary design parts. Today we're lucky enough to get our hands on a very early import K2 to do a 9-hole review. 40 years before the US Special Operations Command had FN Herstal develop the SCAR, the Koreans came up with a K2 that had an AK gas system, an FN-styled gas regulator and piston, driving an M16 bolt that used existing M16 magazines with M249 styled rear sights and an FN FAL para style folding hinge. The rifle was initially developed because South Koreans were paying too much on Colt's licensing fees on the M16A1s, which the South Koreans adopted in 1972. Prior to that, South Koreans were using M1 Garands and M1 carbines, legacy rifles from the 1950s. The idea behind the K2 was to combine the best characteristics of different weapon systems and pay a whole lot less money than the Colt. The K2 rifle worked so well that the Koreans are still using the original design that they debuted in 1984. We took this rifle to the 100-yard range with a few different types of ammunition, and then we shot it at 358 yards to see how well the battle sights compensated for bullet drop. And finally, we put the rifle in the hands of Josh, a USPSA Grandmaster class shooter, to see how the rifle handled up close. Now getting on with it. On the 100-yard range, we fired 9 shots of 55 grain ball of this ARMSCOR ammo to see how it did. We were quite disappointed to see that the grouping sizes nearly maxed out my calipers at 5.8 inches. We then loaded up some 77 grain IMI Razorcore match ammo to see how it did. Now this was surprising. Not a single shot of this 9-hole group landed on paper, so we shot another group of 77 grain with a second target underneath to observe to see if there was any tumbling. This early import version of the K2 was apparently fitted with a 1 to 12 inch twist barrel rather than the Korean mil-spec 1 to 7.3 inch twist. Bullets require a certain amount of spin to stabilize in flight. This is dependent on the weight and length of the bullet. These bullets were coming out of the barrel tumbling rather than spiraling towards the target. One of the tumbling rounds actually impacted the metal railing and fragmented here, and you can see the fragmentation all over the targets. Unsatisfied with these results, we returned to the range a second time with some Swiss GECO 55 grain ammunition, and reshot our target. This time with much satisfaction, the rifle grouped 2.7 inches at 100 yards with the obviously more accurate Swiss ammunition. When we took it to 358 yards, we rotated the rear sights to the 300 meter position, and we aimed at the very top end of the target. Despite the thick front sight post, we were easily able to hit the target. These were 10 inch by 18 inch targets.
Impact.
Later on, Josh took charge of the rifle and quickly found out that the K2 does in fact have a learning curve. Most North American shooters are used to either the AR-15 or AK-47 manual of arms. The K2 rifle calls for the shooter to load the rifle much like an M16, but manipulate the bolt much like an AK-styled weapon. With a rifle in hand, Josh was able to quickly dispatch 55 grain projectiles and hit mostly Alpha and some Charlie zones in his USPSA targets. We should note that the recoil impulse doesn't feel exactly like an AK, and neither does it feel like an M16. It's a gentler row rather than the M4's pop, but a much tighter recoil than the AK-47. The drop-free magazine release is easier to run than the AK magazine latch. It's also interesting to point out that the safety rotates 360 degrees around. This did take some time to get used to.
That's an AR's fire position. That's this baby's fire position.
The FAL-style folding stock was reliable and the sights were easily adjustable. The front sights are permanently affixed, so it's harder for the conscripted soldier to break. Cleaning is an absolutely easy task. The rifle initially disassembles like an AK, but then hinges open like an M16. The AK-style gas system and the FAL-style regulator lends to great reliability, and the M16-style bolts gives it great accuracy. Despite the M16-style bolt, the rifle actually uses a fixed ejector. And when firing, we notice that the ejection pattern mimics the AK rather than the M16. All in all, we are thoroughly impressed that the South Koreans were able to develop a Korean SCAR concept rifle more than 40 years before the Special Operations Command solicited for the SCAR program. And we are also perplexed that not more people knew about this design before. Thank you again for tuning into 9-Hole Reviews. Although we hope that war never breaks out in the Korean Peninsula, the next time you see footage of a Korean soldier on the DMZ with a K2, we hope you think of the ingenuity and the engineering that went behind this interesting piece of weapons development. And until then, we'll see you on the range.
716, this is Steel 96, 4 Vic, 8 packs, Recon 1, green to green, time copy, over.
Steel 96, this is 716, roger, over. 16, Steel 91, 1